guys, welcome back to the channel. It is my favorite TBR of the year to build, and it is my Women in Translation Month TBR. So if you guys don't already know, August is Women in Translation Month. It is a month to celebrate female authors who have their works translated across the world. Clearly I read in English, but these could be books that are translated into whatever language that you read in, from whatever language they were written in. And I love this so much. We are doing for TBR Lowdown like this year-long challenge of reading 12 authors, 12 women from 12 different countries. So I've been filling up that little bingo card, but this is the month that I will really knock it out of the park, because for me, I like to read translated books for that challenge. Other people are just reading books by authors from other countries, whether they're translated or not. So everyone's interpreting it their own way, but the idea is to read across the globe from different female authors. And this month is like the perfect month to get a lot of those boxes filled. Take a second and subscribe and like this video if you haven't already. I really would appreciate it. Otherwise, we're going to jump into this TBR, and we're going to start off with our TBR Lowdown Pig. So every month, podcast and book club that I run with my friend Naomi, we pick a different book to read. We usually do a live show. The last 2 months, we've been trying to figure out how to do it, what we want to do for a discussion, because we feel like we might want to have the author involved in it. So those discussions are coming. But for next month, for August, not next month, for August, our pick is Elena Knows, which is written by Claudia Pinheiro and Claudia Pinheiro. I can't say her name right. He's just downstairs cringing at my gringa. The author is from Argentina, and it's obviously translated from the Spanish, and this book just sounds fantastic. It's all set in one day. It's kind of a mystery, but it's also an exploration of like what it's like to live with Parkinson's. When Rita's body is found hanging in the belfry of the church she's devoted herself to, the investigation is swiftly closed. But her mother, Elena, refuses to accept the police's version of what happened. And despite the physical limitations imposed by her illness, she embarks on a journey to call in an old debt. So you watch Elena trek across Buenos Aires to figure out what happened to Rita. Our main character she's older, she's a little bit like crabby, and she's struggling with Parkinson's disease. So you get to see her unfolding this sort of mystery, but you also see her struggling with her Parkinson's, and it just sounds phenomenal. So we're really excited to start that. You guys can join along with us. I started one book from this list, and that is The Eighth Life by Nina Haratishi. I can't say her name. But this is translated, I believe, from the Georgian, if not from the Georgian, from German, because the author writes in both German and like Georgian. But this is like an epic family saga. I've been reading it for like a day. I'm already 300 pages in. It is just so good and so dramatic and traumatic and just sad and also uplifting, but like it follows the different generations through this family, starting with just before the Russian Revolution, and so far I'm somewhere in just past World War II right now. It just follows this whole family's saga. And it's written by one character who seems to be writing for another character, and I can't tell if that's her daughter or her sister or something, but I'll figure it out. But it's really, 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 really good. And there is this like hot chocolate thing that's going on in the story too, but like that's not like a big part of it. It's not really about hot chocolate. I know it says it on the book, and you kind of think on the back of the book, and you think like it's about somehow hot chocolate, but there is this element of the hot chocolate that like weaves throughout the narrative. But it's really about like the people in this family, and then through the people in this family, it talks about like the history of Russia and Georgia. It's phenomenal. I'm not gonna be able to say like half these authors' names because I can't pronounce things. But next up, I have Magma, which is written by an Icelandic author and is really short and sounds really phenomenal. It talks a lot about like emotional and verbal abuse inside of a relationship, and how that affects you, and the trauma of being in an emotionally abusive relationship, which I don't think is something that gets explored enough. So this is 22-year-old Alicia is in love. As a university student, she was smitten with the intelligent, beautiful classmate who quotes Derrida, reads Latin, and cooks balanced vegetarian meals. Quickly, she's moved in with him, living in his crimped apartment, surrounded by sour towels and flat Diet Cokes. As the newfound intimacy of sharing shower and bed fuels her desire to please her partner, his quiet and pervasive manipulations unravel her. So it's supposed to be a really dark and crazy ride, and I'm here for this like psychological experience. Also, top of my list is Tender as the Flesh, which is also by an Argentine author, and this deals with like it's sort of like literary sci-fi, kind of like horror, and it just sounds fantastic. So essentially, you live in a world where certain people are being slaughtered to be eaten because there really isn't any meat anymore. And this man in the slaughterhouse starts to fall in love or become obsessed with one of the specimens, one of the people that it's going to be slaughtered, and then a whole bunch of stuff unfolds from there. And it just sounds like it's going to be so good. I don't know why my voice is going, but I also have this book, Violets by Kyung-Suk Shin, who is a South Korean author. And this was recommended by Books and Bao. And I really like translated works recommended by Books and Bao, so that's why I picked this up. And this follows San, who's a 22-year-old and alone, and she happens upon a job at a flower shop in Seoul's bustling city center. Haunted by childhood rejection, she stumbles through life painfully vulnerable, stifled, and unsure. She barely registers to others, especially by the ruthless standards of 1990s South Korea. Over the course of one hazy, volatile summer, San meets a curious cast of characters: the non-speaking flower shop owner, a brash coworker, kind farmers, and aggressive customers. Fueled by a quiet desperation to jumpstart her life, she plunges headfirst into obsession with a passing magazine photographer. It says that this explores misogyny, erasure, and repressed desire. San desperately searches for both autonomy and attachment in the unforgiving reality of contemporary Korean society. I don't know, just something about that. It sounds like it's going to be like kind of like dark and challenging, which I love. I also hope to finally get to Tove Diddle's childhood youth dependency, which is sort of it's not a memoir exactly. It's like a sort of fictionalized memoir of I believe the author's life, and it follows one woman's journey through a troubled girlhood into working class Copenhagen through her struggle to live on her own terms. This is a searingly honest, utterly immersive portrayal of love, friendship, art, ambition, and the terrible lure of addiction. And this is translated from the Danish. The author is from Denmark. And this is like one of those classics like modern classics that I've translated lit. It just has to be read. It just has to be read. And I know there's another cover that's really, really pretty, which I can put up next to this, but this is the cover I love. I don't know why. I just love this cover. I also have like a mystery. This is written by Valerie Perrin, and this is translated from the French. And this is supposed to be phenomenal. An intimately told story about a woman who defiantly believes in happiness despite it all. It was a #1 bestseller in France and Italy. And basically you have Violette, who's the caretaker at a cemetery in a small town in Bourguignon, and her life is lived to the predictable rhythms of the often funny and always moving confidences that casual mourners, regular visitors, and sundry colleagues share with her. Violette's routine is disrupted one day by the arrival of Julien Sol, a police chief from out of town, who has come to scatter the ashes of his recently deceased mother on the gravesite of a complete stranger, and it becomes clear that Julien's inexplicable gesture is intertwined with Violette's own complicated past. This is a book that my mother has read and given to me. My mom was like, you absolutely have to read this book. It's phenomenal. Have you read the book with flowers on it yet? Have you read it? Have you read it? Have you read it? I haven't. I'm hoping to get to it this month. Also on my list for this month is Self-Portrait in Green, which you guys have seen a couple times, by Marie Ndiaye, Ndiaye. And this is just a tiny sort of memoir, like literary memoir about the author's life, but she uses like different women in green to talk about parts of her life. And this is again translated from French. And it gives me, the description kind of gives me vibes of In the Dream House. And I'm really curious to get into this. I was hoping to read it on vacation and I didn't get to it, so I really want to get to it this month. I also have The Pen is the Wing of a Bird. If you see me looking over here, I also have a list over here of some books, so just just ignore that. But The Pen is the Wing of a Bird, which again is a Books and Bow recommendation. And this is a collection of short stories written by Afghani women. And this is a voice that we haven't really heard a lot in translated lit. It's not something that comes out of Afghanistan and it gets broadly distributed to the rest of the Western world. I'm very curious to read the short story collection to get a glimpse into the lives of just Afghani women within Afghanistan. It says these are extraordinary and intense glimpses into the shuttered world written by women who have to struggle daily to make their voices heard. That's somebody's review on the back, and it sounds so good and such like a must read. I also, of course, want to finally read All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, which is just like this little novella that she came out with recently. It's her most recent release in English. And it says, friendship does not come easily for Fuyoko. In her 30s, she works as a freelance copy editor and lives alone. Her most frequent interactions are with her manager, Hijiri, a woman who is very different disposition, whose motives are often unclear. One day, Fuyoko stops in the middle of a Tokyo street, transfixed by her reflection in a storefront window. The woman she sees looking back at her is drab, spiritless, inert. She decides she must take steps to transform her life, but as she sets about doing so, events from her past begin to resurface, and her isolation seems increasingly irreversible and complete. And this just, I know it's going to be a fantastic character study because that's what like every Mieko Kawakami is. I know I'm going to feel things. I know there's going to be dark bits. I know there's going to be raw bits. I just know it's going to be phenomenal. So, yes. I have The Phone Booth at the End of the World, which is translated from Italian, and the author is Laura Mai Messina, and she spent some time in Japan. So this is translated from Italy, written by an Italian author, but like is set in Japan. And essentially, after this tsunami in 2011, our main character loses her mother and her daughter, and she's struggling with a lot of grief. And at some point, she finds out that there's this phone booth that is disconnected inside. It's called the Wind Phone, and it's up on this mountain in like one of the places worst hit by the tsunami. And this phone starts to develop this reputation where people go and they speak to their dead relatives, and it becomes this place of sort of like soothing and um, dealing with your grief. And our main characters, like you watch her find this place and her struggle to go there and talk to her loved ones who have passed. She's numb. She makes her own pilgrimage, but she can't bring herself to pick up the receiver. Then she meets Takashi, the widower, whose own daughter has stopped talking in the wake of her mother's death. It just sounds like it's going to be really, really moving and heartbreaking, and hopefully also has a little bit of hope and like upliftingness to it. I've heard so many good things, and I can't wait to finally read it. I got myself a copy. I found it on Pango a while back, and I'm super excited to finally have a chance to read it. Also up in this month, which I have to wait a little bit for Naomi to get her copy, and that is Lady Joker by Kaoru Takamura. And this is like the classic of Japanese crime fiction, and it's 2 volumes. This is volume 1. It is about a real unsolved case. It is supposed to be just la creme de la creme of Japanese crime fiction, and I cannot wait to read this. I am a little bit irked that Naomi is making me wait for her, so she better get a copy soon. Naomi, if you're watching this, pick up your damn copy so that we can read this. And volume 2, I believe, comes out this fall in English. So I can't wait. And this cover is stunning. Like, I honestly can't wait. I hope it is just absolutely phenomenal. I have 2 more physical books that I would like to get to. I have 2 ebooks I'd like to get to. So I have Memory of Water by Emi Tari. I don't know how to say her name. I think she's Finnish. Am I right? Yeah, so this is translated from Finnish. This, I don't know how I found out about this, and this cover is just so intense that I think that's half the reason why I wanted to read this. But this is in the far north of the Scandinavian Union, now occupied by the power state of New Kion. 17-year-old Nori Keitio studies to become a tea master like her father. It is a position that holds great responsibility and a dangerous secret. Tea masters alone know the locations of hidden water sources, including the natural spring that once provided water for her whole village. When Noria's father dies, the secret of the spring reaches the new military commander, and the power of the army is vast indeed. But the precious water reserve is not the only forbidden knowledge Noria possesses, and resistance is a fine line. Threatened with imprisonment and with her life at stake, Noria must make an excruciating dangerous choice between knowledge and freedom. This is a speculative debut. I'd love a good speculative novel. Curious, super curious about this book. Because I don't feel like that back of the book tells me enough. I feel like there might be some like magical realism involved. Curious. I have this collection of poetry from Rosalia de Castro. This is New Leaves. Jesus got this for me. She is a Galician author, and that's where he's from in Spain. And he really wants me to read this. And every time he sees that I haven't, he's mad at me. And what a perfect time to read it. I probably won't read all of it because it is a poetry collection and it's a lengthier poetry collection. So I kind of need to read poetry in sections. So I'd like to start reading this. This isn't like a finished book, but start reading this in Women in Translation. It feels right. Ooh, I almost lost all my books. I have a couple ebooks that I'd like to read, including Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, which is just a collection of short stories that sound really like dark and twisted and weird, and I love dark and twisted and weird. I also want to read Solo Dance by Lee Kutomi, which is another Books and Bow recommendation, and I'll try to pull up a summary for Solo Dance. So this is a powerful novel about the LGBTQ rights movement and gay love in Japan and Taiwan from the most important queer voice in East Asia's millennial generation. Cho Nori, a 27-year-old and originally from Taiwan, is working an office job in Tokyo. While her colleagues worry about the economy, life insurance policies, marriage, and children, she is forced to keep her unconventional life hidden, including her sexuality and the violent attack that prompted her to move to Japan. There is also her unusual fascination with death. She knows from personal experience how devastating death can be, but for her it is also creative fuel. Solo Dance depicts the painful coming of age of a gay person in Taiwan and corporate Japan. This striking debut is an intimate and powerful account of a search for hope after trauma. It 100% sounds like something I would read. And then the last book on the list is The Employees by Olga Ravin. When it's translated from, I can't remember what it's translated from. Editing Alyssa will put it on the screen so that you guys know. I found this because it's shortlisted for the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize, which is a new book prize for like speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi. And it just sounded really interesting. And I love that it was translated because I'm always looking for translated speculative fiction, fantasy, etc., etc. So I don't know, it just sounded weird, and it looks like it's a really weird book. It's like told in like almost little interviews. It's but not like a Daisy Jones and the Six interviews. It's like written statements, that kind of interview. And this is the summary. It was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize, and it reshuffles a sci-fi voyage into a riotous original existential nightmare. Funny and doom-drenched, The Employees chronicles the fate of the 6,000 ship. The human and humanoid crew members complain about their daily tasks in a series of staff reports and memos. When the ship takes on a number of strange objects from the planet New Discovery, the crew becomes strangely and deeply attached to them, even as tensions boil towards mutiny, especially among the humanoids. Olga's prose is chilling, crackling, exhilarating, and foreboding. The Employees probes into what makes us human while delivering a hilariously stinging critique of life governed by the logic of productivity. I'm very curious about this new book prize. This is like one of the things I hadn't ever heard of on the list, and I've never seen it anywhere. So I'm really curious about this little book because that's not enough books. There's just not enough books for me to read. I do have one other book that I have already started because it's a buddy read with Naomi and Dee reads. She has a Discord group that I joined where they read a lot of the book prize lists, and they're currently doing a buddy read of like reading the Booker and reading the books nominated for the Booker Prize, which just came out. And Trust by Hernan Diaz, which is not translated, did just recently get nominated for the Booker. It's on the long list. So this is the first book that we are kind of all reading together. I'm really excited to read it with both Naomi and with this group of people. And they're doing I know that DD Reads is doing a like Zoom call at the end of August to discuss it. So I'm just really curious to talk to everybody and see everybody's thoughts and all of that. I've only read 2 chapters because again, I said I'm reading it slow, but because it's for a buddy read. But this is a really interesting book that's giving me a little bit of like Amor Towles vibes from Rules of Civility. I think in terms of like the way he's talking about New York City back in like the 20s. not thematically with the story or anything like that, but just kind of, I'm getting that same nostalgic feeling that I had while I was reading Rules of Civility, reading this. But anyway, it's an unparalleled novel about money, power, intimacy, and perception. Even through the roar and effervescence of the 1920s, everyone in New York has heard of Benjamin and Helen Rask. He is a legendary Wall Street tycoon. She is the daughter of eccentric aristocrats. Together, they have risen to the very top of a world of seemingly boundless wealth, all as a decade of excess and speculation draws to an end. But at what cost have they acquired their immense fortune? This is the mystery at the center of Bonds, a successful 1937 novel that all of New York seems to have read, yet there are other versions of this tale of privilege and deceit. Diaz's Trust elegantly puts these competing narratives into conversations with one another and in tension with the perspective of one woman bent on disentangling fact from fiction. The result is a novel that spans over a century and becomes more exhilarating with each new revelation. At once an immersive story and a brilliant literary puzzle, Trust engages the reader in a quest for the truth while confronting the deceptions that often live at the heart of personal relationships, the reality warping forces of capital, and the ease with which power can manipulate facts. So the first two chapters so far have really been meeting our two characters, Benjamin and Helen, and you're in, I think this first part is that book Bonds, which, yeah, so the first book is that book Bonds, and then there's like there's four parts, and I have a feeling that as we go, you will get that unraveling of what was real from part one to what is actually real in reality, I hope. So I've heard nothing but good things. I can't wait to hear everybody else's thoughts when we're done. And that's my one non-translated book for the month that's in this pile. So that's everything I have for Women in Translation month. If you guys are also going to be reading some books for Women in Translation, I'd love to know what you guys are reading. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think